When students start learning to identify triads and even sing them and stuff like that in ear training and theory classes, that's very doable. They learn it quickly. So if you see a bunch of letters jumbled up like this, A and a C and an F, pretty soon you learn to just sort of descramble it and go, this isn't an A chord, A, C, E, or this isn't a C chord, C, G, C, F, A, C. And that's there, and that's good. And then we can learn, F major, F minor, F diminished, all those kind of things. Problem comes is when we jump from triads, right, to seventh chords. It becomes exponentially more difficult to identify them, as well as to spell them, because they have another part to them, and then even more difficult to hear them, and then more difficult than that to sing them, especially if they're in inversions or you're asked to sing down. This is a multi-step thing, and there's lots of different specific things we could talk about, but I want to talk about in this video the idea of primary and secondary triads inside a chord. For instance, if we take our original thing here and you see these notes and you see this note too, a student might still just go like, oh, I see this is an F chord, because they're more familiar with the triads, and they're not recognizing that inside every seventh chord there are actually two triads that can be spelled. This is not an F chord with a seventh or an F6 like FAC. The next note would be E. This is in fact a D, F, A, and then my seventh is a C, and we don't see that right away. With a little work you can learn to identify chords like that, but let's take this chord right here, D, F, A, C. And if you think about it, that's a D minor triad with a minor seventh, and that's the way we teach them in theories. Minor triad with a minor seventh, or a minor triad with a seventh that's a whole step down from there. But you could also look at it like this, and this will help us, especially as we get into ear training and soloing and things as well. If you think of it like, there's my primary triad. And by the way, I don't know of another textbook that thinks about it like this. I'm sure it's out there, and I'm sure that in jazz and sort of commercial music programs they might talk about it like this. I was thinking about this more as a way to help students learn to sing these things, because if somebody said to you, here's a note, go ahead and sing down and sing me a minor seventh chord, that's just really difficult for most students, right? But if I said to you, here's a note, right, and I said, well, this is my secondary triad right there, and I said, sing me down a major triad, a lot of students are very good at going la na na, not a problem, right? And if I said sing me a minor triad, they could probably do that too. So as a way of thinking about this, if you go da na na, and then you go da na na, minor triad, da na 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 na, and think of them as two separate triads that interlock. From a singing perspective, especially when you have to go down from the top, or it's not in root position, or even just hearing it and recognizing it, that can be really difficult. Now there are some helps that are not just this, like for instance the descending minor 7 chord is part of the Girl with the Flaxen Hair by Debussy. Right, and so you can learn specific songs that might have those in them, but they're more difficult to find and more difficult to wrangle and master in your ears. But most everybody gets good at singing these triads, right? So my students, and doing this as a supplement to what we talked about in class for my students, is to review this, okay? So if you think of every seventh chord as a primary triad and a secondary triad on top, let's just list up our chords here. We have a major 7 chord. We have a dominant 7 chord. Some books call that the major minor, because it's a major triad with a minor 7. We have the minor 7 chord. We have the half diminished 7 chord, or the minor 7 flat 5, sometimes is what it's called. And then we have the diminished 7 chord right here. And so we can think of these as how we traditionally spell them. This is, and I think I'll do these on D just so you can see. This is a major triad, right? Plus a major 7. Okay, but you can think of this as a major triad and interlocking minor triad right there, right? So, you know, if we give you this note here, you can go up a major triad, right? And then from here, you can just do a minor triad. There's the Peanuts soundtrack song and the Nora Jones song that has a descending one of those, but anybody can do triads with a little practice, okay? Dominant 7 chord, we'll just do it on D again, and you can see this is also a major triad, but then it's got the lowered 7, so that's a diminished triad for my secondary triad right there. Minor chords, we've already done this one, D, F, A, that's a minor triad. And then here with the C, it's a major triad right there, right? Half diminished, it's a D, F, A flat, that's my diminished, right? And then it has the minor 7th, which is a minor triad, making that there. And the diminished is purely symmetrical. It's going to be a D, F, A flat, which is diminished. And then from here, it's going to go up to a C flat, right? And that will be diminished as well. So if you start to learn these as primary and secondary interlocking triads, it has a whole host of applications, both in terms of analysis, quick recognition, solo choices, if you don't always want to start at the root, and ear training advantages, both hearing and singing. So, you know, if you hear, oh, I don't know, we hear this chord right here, like this. Now, hopefully with just enough practice, you go, oh, that's some kind of dominant chord, right? But if you hear, right, then you go, well, that's a diminished triad right there, right? And if this is memorized, you know that it can only be, if you have a diminished triad, it could only be this right here, or this right there, or this right there, right? And then again, you have to have this memorized. We do it with exercise and practice and some flashcards and things. But then if you hear the next note and your intervals are good, you go, well, that's a whole step. So it can't be this one because that's a major third, and it can't be this one because it's a minor third, right? But you can say, well, what is it then? Well, this is my other diminished, and then it's a whole step up to the root. So this is a dominant in first inversion because I'm hearing from the third up, right? And it works in both directions, right? Even, you know, with third inversion chords that start on the 7th, if you hear something like this, like this one, let's see, starting on the 7th. Sure. Okay. Well, you go, maybe you can hear that as the half diminished 7th that it is. And that's great, because that's where we do want to be. But in the short term, or if you've been asked to sing it, right? You go, oh, well, there's a whole step there. And immediately you go, well, that's my 7th to root. And you can ignore the major 7, which is a half step up to the root, and the diminished 7, because that's another augmented second. It sounds like a minor third up to the root. So it's one of these ones right here, right there, because they have a whole step up to their root, right? And then when you hear the rest of this, right? And you hear na 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 na, you go, that's a diminished triad. Well, it's not one of these ones because I'm sorry, it's not one of these ones because the step is wrong between the 7th to the root right there. And then you say it's a diminished triad and it's coming after 7 to root, because if you hear the whole step first, right, then you're going from 7th up to root. So you know that this thing coming here afterwards is starting your primary triad, and the only one that's got a diminished chord for your primary triad that's left as an option is your half diminished 7. Okay, so first step, you got to be able to spell your triads and understand that, of course. But when we're working on seventh chords, we want to recognize which one is the primary triad that makes up the chord. And then if you add the seventh, what's the interlocking secondary triad? And then if you get good at singing those and you get good at hearing those, then you start to see them in the music. You can anticipate what's going on. And also you can sing them and hear them despite their configuration and things like that. Of course, this only works with closed voicings, but that's the place where we start with, right there, right? So if you think about it, then I'm just going to color code this. We have major triad, and major triad up top there, right? And we have diminished triad, diminished triad, diminished triad. And then we have a minor triad up top there, and a minor triad up top there, and a minor triad down there. And this is also a diminished chord right up on top here as well. Diminished, diminished, right? So you start to, hear or see certain configurations of things, and it should immediately tip you off to it. Well, it's this or this, and you eliminate from there from an ear training point of view. Or it, you listen to the overall quality, and it tells you, given that, what's coming up next. For instance, if you heard some configuration of this, like you heard this, and you go, oh, it's a minor triad. Well, it's either the top of a major 7 chord, into which I think I'm going to a half step up, or it's the bottom of a minor 7th chord, so I'm going to go up a minor 3rd and get my, get my minor 7 there. Or it's this minor one right here, the secondary triad, and I'm going to go up a whole step to there, right? And in fact, yeah, I go up the whole step to there. So this is my half diminished 7 chord. Well, now if you widen that now and say, well, half diminished 7 chords, unless they're used in some kind of chromatic secondary way, are all either 2 chords in minor or they're 7 chords in major, right? We can see what to expect next. Like for instance, if this is a 2 chord, then I'm expecting it's going to go to a 5 chord next, because I'm widening this understanding out to my chord progression, right? So then this will go to my 5 chord, right? And I can hear that's a dominant, which should then take me to my 1 chord in minor if we're staying in key, right? However, if this is, let's see, and it's as a 7 chord, right? Then it could go to a 5 by substitute, but eventually it's going to go to 1, basically, right? And so we go from here to here, right? So, all right, as my class goes on, because we're learning this in the 2nd term here, right now, we'll widen the application and do other videos too, and other online sort of quizzes and things to help you memorize these combinations and then start to practically apply them so you can see what's going on.